Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, all of you see, identify this picture and compare with this. So what here in this picture, what the hen is doing, is just to peep forward, means looking forward by raising the head. Here you identify in this picture, the child holding the head upwards means by raising the head. So how it is raising? And means how he can raise his head by the contraction of an important muscle. So now we are going to discuss the posterior triangle of the neck. In that, and key muscle is there. So that is the sternocleidomastoid. So just you imagine, if there is no that sternocleidomastoid muscle, there is no horizontal gaze. So means one cannot see the structures, means objectives in front of you. So what is that main action, means function of this sternocleidomastoid bilaterally. So this is a movement of the head. So one can extend the head, right, by flexing the neck, means cervical vertebra. So this is the main action bilaterally of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. So we can see the forward objectives, means keeping forward. So that movement is mainly established by the contraction of sternocleidomastoid. Now we are going to see that muscle. Then, see, this is a shortened neck muscle. So what is that shortened neck muscle here? Representing sternocleidomastoid muscle. So what happened due to shortening is a congenital abnormality. So what happened? The muscle size, means length is decreased, so that the head is turning. Means shortening means here you see this is a contraction. So this stretching, overstretching, means the contraction of this sternocleidomastoid, the head can move towards the opposite side. So the muscle on the left side means the head towards the right side. So this is the abnormality. So what are those abnormalities? According to this sternocleidomastoid, we'll discuss detail, right? Then this is a palsy, one palsy. Here you can appreciate the limb. The left limb is in abnormal position. So what is this abnormal position? Just the arm is hanging on the side of the trunk, right? And medially rotated. Then you see at the wrist and fingers completely flexed. So what is this condition is called Erb's palsy or Erb's paralysis. So what is that Erb's paralysis? We'll see. Then this is one more nerve injury. So what is this? Klumpke's palsy. So in this Klumpke's palsy, you see the all fingers, they are flexed, acutely flexed, and even at the wrist also flexion is there. So this condition is otherwise called claw hand. So we can see these two palsies are because of the injury of the nerves. So what are these nerves are involved in this posterior triangle? We are going to discuss in detail. So before going to that, these are the objectives we must know. So what is the posterior triangle of the neck? So in the last class, the triangle introduction is over, right? Anterior triangle is completed. Now we are discussing about the posterior triangle. So for which we should know what are the boundaries and how the posterior triangle again is further divided into two more triangles. So what is that subdivision of this posterior triangle? Then I told you now, sternocleidomastoid is a key muscle. So what is this key muscle? Why it is key muscle? So we should know details about this origin, insertion, nerve supply, its function with clinical importance, right? Then occipital triangle. I told the subdivisions of the triangle, which is divided into occipital and supraclavicular. So how it is divided and what are these triangles? What are the important structures, means contents present in each triangle. Then special mention to various structures in posterior triangle. So if you go through these two triangles, we can see the important nerves and vessels. So what are these important nerves and vessels? These are the great vessels which are continuing towards the upper limb. So they are the nerves and vessels which are present in the posterior triangle are important, and they are related to, in relation to the sternocleidomastoid. So we'll see how these structures are present in these triangles. Then anatomical basis of this Erb's palsy and Klumpke's palsy. So these are the things now we are going to discuss. So we'll see one by one. Coming to the boundaries of the posterior triangle. See, this is the side of the neck. So the side of the neck is divided diagonally by this obliquely placed muscle. So what is this? Sternocleidomastoid muscle. So by this sternocleidomastoid, the side of the neck is divided into anteriorly one triangle and behind is one more triangle. This is posterior triangle. So what are the actual boundaries of this posterior triangle? See, in front there is a sternocleidomastoid. So a particular triangle means boundaries. So exactly this posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid forming the in front boundary, whereas behind it is formed by the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. So between these two boundaries, a triangle is appreciated. So what is this triangle? Must have an apex and a base. So what is the apex here? The two boundary muscles where they're meeting towards the occipital bone here, you see, which are inserted. The sternocleidomastoid is inserted to the mastoid process and still backwards to the occipital bone. This is a superior nuchal line. So at this superior nuchal line, these two boundary muscles are meeting where it forms the apex of the posterior triangle, right? Then what is the base for this triangle? Exactly opposite to that. So apex is above, must be base is below. So the base is formed by the middle 1/3 of the clavicle. If you divide this clavicle into three parts, the exact middle third, because anterior third gives origin to the sternocleidomastoid, whereas posterior 1/3 receives the insertion of trapezius. So in between we can see this is the middle third where is forming the base for the posterior triangle, right? Then after that, roof and floor, we'll discuss what is the roof. See, if you want to dissect the posterior triangle, we should give an oblique incision, skin incision, extends from the suprasternal notch to the mastoid process. So if you reflect the skin from this imaginary line backwards, so immediately after reflection of the skin, we can appreciate the superficial fascia. As you know, once you remove the skin, what is the tissue present immediately beneath that? Superficial fascia, right? So that superficial fascia containing superficial structures. So they are nothing but cutaneous structures, cutaneous nerves and vessels. So they are going to supply the skin. So there is an additional structure and important muscle is present in this superficial fascia of the neck. So what is that muscle is called platysma muscle. So how can you define this platysma muscle? This is a subcutaneous striated muscle. It is a striated means voluntary muscle present in the superficial fascia. So that's why it is also known as subcutaneous striated or voluntary muscle. Actually, this is a remnant of the panniculus carnosus. You see in the lower animals, we can appreciate a muscle throughout the body immediately beneath the skin, means in the superficial fascia, right? So what is that muscle? Panniculus carnosus, otherwise called superficial subcutaneous striated muscle. So, but in man, what happened? It is complete. Most of the muscle is degenerated. Only a few parts is still persistent. So, what is that persistent panniculus carnosus? On the face. All the facial muscles are representing the remnants of the panniculus, and moreover, this platysma muscle also. Even this platysma muscle is a facial muscle only. It is migrating downwards for the functional purpose, right? So why? How can you tell this is a facial muscle? Because it's a nerve supply. The platysma is supplied by the cervical branch of the facial nerve. So all the muscles of facial expression are supplied by the facial nerve, including this platysma. So this is a facial muscle is migrating downwards towards the neck region, right? So subcutaneous muscle. So in the neck region, we can appreciate a quadrilateral subcutaneous muscle immediately beneath the skin, right? So this muscle in the second picture, you appreciate all the nerves and vessels which are piercing this subcutaneous muscle. Why? They should supply this skin, so they should pierce this subcutaneous muscle. And in other regions also it is persistent. You see in the palm, palmaris brevis, it is also representing the panniculus, right? Even in the dartus muscle, in the scrotum, it is also representing this panniculus. So this is a panniculus carnosus remnant. Then once you reflect this platysma, immediately beneath that we have to identify the superficial fascia including these superficial structures. So what are these superficial structures? We'll discuss detail. So the veins are very prominent here. This is a obliquely placed vein, external jugular vein, right? And opposite to that, you see behind that there is one more vein, posterior external jugular vein. In front of that means in the anterior triangle, a linear vein is present, extends from the chin region, just beneath the chin. The vein is extended, begins. So what is that vein is anterior jugular vein. And all these cutaneous nerves. So one can tell cutaneous nerve means you can appreciate all these structures must be in the superficial fascia, right? So all these are superficial cutaneous nerves. These nerves are derived from the cervical plexus. We'll see what are these cervical plexus, right? So what is the roof of the posterior triangle? Skin. After that, immediately platysma you should appreciate in the superficial fascia. Then beneath that, there must be a deep fascia, that is investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. Now see what are these superficial structures. You can appreciate here. See anterior jugular vein here. This is external jugular vein. Lesser occipital nerve. Great auricular nerve. Transverse cervical nerve. See transverse cervical. It is crossing the sternocleidomastoid horizontally, right? And one is ascending on the surface of the sternocleidomastoid is the great auricular nerve. And one ascends along the posterior border of sternocleidomastoid is the lesser occipital nerve. Then supraclavicular nerve, this is the only descending branch from the cervical plexus, right? So supraclavicular nerve. And one more branch here. Exactly what is the structure? Can you appreciate the structure? This is the apex of the parotid gland. So just below and behind the ear, you see, this is the apex of the parotid. It is pierced by a nerve which is coming out to supply the platysma muscle. So a nerve supplying the platysma, it should be a cervical branch of the facial nerve. So these are the structures present in the roof. Then we'll discuss about the sternocleidomastoid. I told you initially what is this? Is a key muscle of the posterior triangle. Not only posterior triangle, it is a key muscle of the neck. So how can you tell this is a key muscle? Because important structures are related. So what are these important structures? First we should know what is the origin. See, it takes origin by two heads, sternal head, clavicular head. So the sternal head takes origin from the manubrium sternum, whereas clavicular head takes origin from the anterior 1/3 of the clavicle, right? So between the two heads there is a small gap, a triangular interval. You can appreciate in the second picture here. See, in the midline, just above the manubrium, what is this space? Suprasternal space. Just beside that, this is a small triangular area which is present above the medial end of the clavicle. So this is because a gap between the two heads of the sternocleidomastoid. It is otherwise called lesser supraclavicular triangular or space. So this space is very much important, and immediately beneath the skin and fascia, deep to the deep cervical fascia, we can appreciate the termination of the internal jugular vein. So through which we can insert a central venous catheter. So they can use this internal jugular vein at particularly this area for the central catheterization, right? So what is the insertion of the sternocleidomastoid? See, insertion is a strong tendon. So the two heads at the midpoint of the neck fuse to form a single belly. As it ascends upwards, it forms a rounded belly. Then inserted as a round tendon to the mastoid process, some part, and further behind, it is going to insert the superior nuchal line of the occipital bone. You see, by its origin, sternal clavicular, and by its insertion, mastoid and superior nuchal line of the occipital bone, you can consider this muscle as, the name given to this muscle as sternocleido-occipitomastoid. Simply, we can tell sternomastoid muscle. But anatomically, we should give nomenclature as a sternocleido-occipitomastoid muscle. So, this is the origin and insertion of this muscle. Then what is the nerve supply? See, the sternocleidomastoid is supplied by the spinal part of the accessory nerve. So what is this accessory nerve? The 11th cranial nerve, as it emerges through this cranial foramina into the neck region. So here it gives off, means as it passes through the jugular foramen, it leaves a branch to join with the vagus nerve. So what is that leaving branch is the cranial root. After that, you see, through this vagus nerve, the cranial root supplies the muscles of the pharynx and soft palate, you know, by means of the pharyngeal plexus, right? So what is this? Another part is the spinal part. So the spinal part, as it takes origin from this upper 4 or 5 spinal segments, cervical segments, it takes origin, then it descends through this jugular foramen, leaves the vagus nerve here. So it descends as a spinal accessory nerve. So this spinal accessory nerve first appears in the anterior triangle. So passing through the muscle or behind the sternocleidomastoid. So before passing through the muscle, it provides a branch to the sternocleidomastoid, and after it appears in the posterior triangle, you can see as a important structure in the posterior triangle, right? Then it leaves the posterior triangle, means disappearing after passing beneath the trapezius muscle. So this is an important muscle for the two important muscles. Now is important for the two muscles, sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscles. And moreover, the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius. See here, the C2, C3 nerves also supplying this sternocleidomastoid, whereas C3, C4 supplies the trapezius. Most probably, these branches are conveying the proprioception fibers from these two muscles, right? Then what is the function of the sternocleidomastoid? So the main function of the muscle means rotation of the head. So unilaterally acting means the unilateral, only one side of the muscle contracts means the movement of the head towards the opposite side. So turning of the head, and in the same case there is a flexion of the neck. So cervical part of vertebral column is flexed and the head is moving towards the opposite side. This is the actual function of the sternocleidomastoid. Then bilaterally if it is contracted, so what happened? It flexes the neck and extends the head at the atlanto-occipital joint. See, it is very, very important function. As it extends the head, means other muscles also there on the back, the post-vertebral muscles, the back muscles, which are important for the extension of the head. In addition, this is a muscle bilaterally act to extend the head at the atlanto-occipital joint. So by this action only, one can see forward. See, how can you see forwards? By peeping. So peeping forward movement of the head is because of the sternocleidomastoid. So this composite movement is very important to protract the head and to maintain the horizontal gaze. That's why one can walk properly, right? So that peep forward over, even in a crowd, how can you see? By peeping forwards. So this is the main action of the sternocleidomastoid. Then what is the clinical importance of sternocleidomastoid? So the Wryneck or torticollis. So what is this Wryneck or torticollis? So it's a problem involving the muscles of the neck, particularly what is this muscle? Sternocleidomastoid. So causes the head to tilt down. So by the contraction, just you imagine what happened. It tilts down. Then the so what is this meaning of this torticollis? You see, tortus means tortuous, as you know, twisted. Then collis means neck. So twisting of the neck. And it may be, the condition may be congenital or acquired. So in congenital, what happened? This head is tilted downwards like this, and chin is passing, means forwards towards the opposite side. Means the chin is facing opposite shoulder. So this is a congenital deformity. Whereas acquired, so due to mal placing of the pillows or any something trauma, so what happened? There is a acquired torticollis. So it is spasmodic. So the contraction is very painful, and you can feel even to want to move the head, you feel very pain. So one by one we'll see what are these superficial structures. So what is the first important structure? Immediately once you remove this platysma, you can appreciate a vein. So that is the external jugular vein. See, this is a university question, 4 marks question maybe. So we have to write what is the external jugular vein. So for any vein, we should tell first formation. how it is formed. So formation presents tributaries. So what are the other tributaries on its course towards the termination? So what is the termination? So coming to the formation, it is formed already discussed in blood vessels. So what is the formation of the external jugular vein? So just below means behind the angle of mandible. It is formed by the posterior division of the retromandibular vein. What is retromandibular vein? Superficial temporal and maxillary vein joins to form a single vein within the substance of parotid. So what is that? Retromandibular vein. And retromandibular vein divides into anterior division, posterior division. So this posterior division receives the posterior auricular vein and joins to form external jugular vein. So from here it extends downwards and backwards, crossing this muscle superficially. So what is this muscle? Sternocleidomastoid muscle. And crossing this muscle, then passes down to the lower part of the posterior triangle. So this is a supraclavicular triangle. So we'll discuss what is the supraclavicular triangle. But what is this termination? So in the supraclavicular triangle, after receiving these three veins, drains into the subclavian vein. So one by one, what are the tributaries? See, first posterior auricular vein, posterior division of retromandibular vein. These are the formative tributaries. Then transverse cervical, suprascapular, anterior jugular. These are the terminal tributaries, means just before the termination. Then occipital vein occasionally, because occipital vein drains mostly into the suboccipital venous plexus, right? Then posterior external jugular vein. See, it is an occasional posterior external jugular vein. And we should not confuse with the external, because the relation with this sternocleidomastoid, the posterior external jugular is along the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, whereas external jugular vein is crossing the muscle obliquely, right? Then posterior external jugular vein, oblique jugular vein communicates with the internal jugular vein. A communicating vein here you can appreciate just anterior to the sternocleidomastoid. So we are communicating with internal jugular vein. So these are the tributaries, right? What is the clinical importance of this external jugular vein? To see, if you want to drain the subcutaneous abscess, so if you give a deep incision, means what happened? It may damage this vein, and moreover the structures beyond this also. What are those structures? Superficial cutaneous mass. So what is the clinical relevance? You see, if it is severed in an injury with a knife, so what happened? Its lumen is held open. Lumen is held open, particularly at this junction. Here you see, all of you identify here where the external jugular vein pierces the deep fascia. Why? Because it drains into the deep vein. So it should pierce a fascia. What is that? Deep cervical fascia. Here, investing layer of the deep cervical fascia, right? So what is the reason why the lumen is held open? Because you know the reason. What is that? Here, the vein where it opens through this fascia, investing layer, it is adherent to this fascia. So if it is damaged or cut across this point, external jugular vein, the two ends are open. So immediately what happened? Just to imagine. So through these open ends, the air may be extends into this deeper aspect. Means what happened? Air embolism by the suction of the chest in inspiration. So this is a very emergency condition. So what happened? We must place our finger to close that wound. By this, by which what happened? The embolism may be stopped, right? So it may produce the cyanosis. So we should place finger to means applying pressure on the wound, stopping the bleeding and entry of the air. So we must know about this external jugular vein, right? Here one more thing. See exactly where it is piercing, and immediately beneath that what happened? It opens into the subclavian vein. So exactly at the termination it has one valve, and 4 centimeters above that one more valve is there. So in between valves the vein may be dilated, means in increased venous return the vein is engorged, or in between the two valves we can see a dilatation. So what is the dilatation is called jugular sinus. We can appreciate. And that's why you see this is the reason the extra jugular vein can serve as a venous manometer. So in recumbent position, we can appreciate the venous blood in this middle third of the vein, means in between these two valves. So it can act as a venous manometer also, right? Now coming to the cervical plexus. So why should we know the cervical plexus? See, in the neck region, all the 8 cervical nerves along with the first thoracic nerve, they are forming the complicating plexus. So each spinal nerve, as you know, after passing through the intervertebral foramen, it divides into ventral primary rami, dorsal primary rami, right? So the dorsal primary rami is responsible for the structures on the back. Then what happened to this ventral primary rami? So the ventral primary rami of the cervical, all 8 cervical and first, they are complicated in the form of a plexus. So these plexus are named as cervical and brachial plexus. See why it is known as cervical plexus? Because these plexus supplying the nerve, muscles and structures present in the neck. Whereas brachial plexus are supplying the structures of the upper limb. So these complicated plexus are named as cervical and brachial. And what is the reason why this plexus is formed in this particular region? So because of the complexity of the muscles, right? So for example, if the muscle takes origin from the first cervical myotome, it should be supplied by C1. But here what happened? The muscles are taking complicated origin, means different myotomes giving origin to the single muscle. So must be different neuromeres supply a single muscle. So in such a way, what happened? The nerves are forming the plexus in the cervical region as well as the upper limb for the brachial plexus. So now coming to what is the cervical plexus? So what for the cervical plexus? It is supplying the skin, muscles of the neck, and the important structure is diaphragm, right? So you know the diaphragm location. It is not present in the cervical region, but it is supplied by the cervical nerves. So what indicates here? The diaphragm is migrated structure. So it is migrated from the neck to the trunk. So it should be supplied by this cervical, right? So skin and muscles of the neck, then diaphragm. And what is the formation of the cervical plexus? So upper 4 cervical nerves, C1, C2, C3, C4. So ventral primary rami of all these 4 unites to form a plexus which is known as cervical plexus, otherwise called ventral cervical plexus, right? So this cervical plexus in the form of a arched loops. So why these arched loops? Because each cervical root again divides into upper and lower, except in case of C1. C1 doesn't give any upper branch, but it has a lower branch. So joins with the upper branch of C2. Like that, between C1, C2, C3, C4, we have 3 loops, right? So what are these 3 loops between C1, C2, C2, C3, and C3, C4? So from these loops, the branches are giving in the form of deep or superficial branches. And moreover, these plexus are having communications. So what are these branches? You see, the deep means muscular branches. So what are these muscles? Why they are supplied by this cervical plexus? So these muscles are in front of the vertebral column and the side of the vertebral column. So what are these muscles? Prevertebral and paravertebral. So they are supplying the prevertebral, including the rectus muscles and longus muscle. Then paravertebral muscle. So the important paravertebral muscles present in the neck region are the scalenii muscles. So they are supplied by these deep branches. Okay. Then what are the superficial branches? So superficial, name indicates superficial. They are entering the superficial. So what is that superficial structure? Superficial fascia. So why they are appreciated in the superficial fascia? To supply this skin. So the skin of the neck is supplied by these branches of the superficial branches of the cervical plexus. So these branches are included as a lesser occipital nerve, then transverse cervical nerve, supraclavicular nerve, then great auricular nerve. These are the nerves. Whereas communicating branches, you see already it is discussed in the anterior triangle, the ansa cervicalis. So what is the ansa cervicalis? Just you see here, the C1 doesn't give upper branch, but it gives a communicating branch with the hypoglossal nerve. So a communicating branch from the C1 passes through the hypoglossal nerve, and at the great tip of the greater horn, what happens? It leaves the hypoglossal nerve as a descendens hypoglossal, and it joins with the descendens cervicalis. So descendens cervicalis is derived from the loop between C to C3. So fibers from the C to C3 passing through this descendens cervicalis. So these are an arched loop present in front of the carotid sheath is forming ansa cervicalis. This ansa cervicalis is supplying the infrahyoid muscles mostly. Only one suprahyoid, that is the nerve to the geniohyoid, and rest are supplying the infrahyoid muscles. So here see infrahyoid muscles, single muscle is supplied by the C2, C3 or C1, C2 like that. What indicates here? That muscle is taking more than one myotope, right? So in this way, the cervical plexus are formed in the neck fins here. So communicating branches means through this hypoglossal nerve and communicate with the cervical sympathetic trunk. So here ansa cervicalis is important. Then what is the clinical importance? So to cervical nerves block means to give an anesthesia on the neck region. So cervical plexus must be blocked. So this cervical plexus where we have to block. So what is that landmark exactly? The midpoint of the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. What is that? Midpoint of the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. So where exactly these nerves are emerging from deep to superficial. So surgeons will give an anesthesia at this particular point, okay, before their surgical interventions. So this junction is very important. So where cutaneous branches of cervical plexus emerges, so it is known as nerve point of the neck for surgeons. Okay. So just I want to tell what are these cutaneous nerves. Here you see, what are these cutaneous nerves from the cervical plexus? 3 are ascending branches: lesser occipital, great auricular, transverse cervical. Only one is a supraclavicular, is a descending branch. So you see the great auricular nerve ascends exactly at the midpoint of the posterior border of sternocleidomastoid. So it ascends across the sternocleidomastoid on reaching the lobule of the parotid gland, means apex of the parotid. So here what happened, it divides into anterior and posterior. So the anterior branch supplies the skin over the angle of mandible, whereas posterior branch supplies the lobule and concha. So most of this lower part of the auricle is supplied by this great auricular nerve. So if you want to give an anesthesia to this particular nerve, we have to choose a point exactly at the angle of the mandible, right? So this is a great auricular nerve. Then lesser occipital nerve. It ascends along the posterior border. Then on reaching the scalp here, it provides branches to the skin of the auricle, lateral surface of the auricle. In addition, it supplies the scalp. Only a little part of the scalp is supplied by this lesser occipital nerve, because a lesser means there must be a greater occipital. So there is a greater occipital nerve from the dorsal primary rami. That is a greater occipital nerve supplying this maximum posterior aspect of the scalp. So here from the cervical plexus, what is this? Lesser occipital nerve, right? Then transverse cervical nerve. It forwards on the surface of the sternocleidomastoid. On reaching the anterior border, what happens? It divides into upper and lower branches. So most of the front of the neck skin is supplied by this transverse cervical branch of the transverse cervical nerve derived from the cervical plexus. So this is the transverse. Then what is supraclavicular nerve? See, the supraclavicular nerve descends and divides into 3 branches: medial, intermediate and lateral. So the medial branch, as it descends along the medial end of the clavicle, it supplies a joint here. What is that? Sternoclavicular joint, and it supplies the skin over that particular area. So it may extend down as up to the second rib level. So the skin over this region is supplied by medial branch. Then intermediate branch. See, intermediate branch passing in front of the clavicle. Sometimes it may pierce the clavicle. So that's why clavicle is otherwise called dermal bone. Already you know that. So what is the clavicle? Is a dermal bone. So how can you tell this is a dermal bone? As it is pierced by a cutaneous branch, right? So what is this cutaneous branch? Middle branch of the supraclavicular nerve, and it supplies the skin over this area. Then lateral branch, it descends superficial to the lateral end of the clavicle, then reaching the summit of the shoulder. So the lateral aspect and posterior aspect of the shoulder is supplied, means mostly the summit of the skin over the summit of shoulder is supplied by this lateral branch of the supraclavicular nerve. In addition, it supplies a joint also. What is the joint present here at the lateral end of the clavicle? Acromioclavicular joint. So here it is supplying that joint also. So this is the detail about the superficial nerves, means branches of the cervical plexus, right? So now coming to the floor of the posterior triangle. We should know the floor of the posterior triangle. Morphologically, it is very, very important. So what is this floor of the posterior triangle? The floor is mainly formed by the muscles. So it is a carpet. What type of carpet? Muscular carpet. So from above downwards, various muscles are forming the carpet-like structure for the floor of the posterior triangle. And most close to the apex, it is formed by the semispinalis capitis. Sometimes we may not appreciate this muscle, but in some structure means we can appreciate. Okay. So what is it? Close to the apex, we can appreciate semispinalis capitis. And immediately beyond that, the other all muscles are sloping downwards obliquely. So only the semispinalis is vertical. And other muscles are downwards vertically, laterally, right? So what are these muscles? Splenius capitis muscle, then levator scapulae muscle, and 3 scalene muscles. From posterior to anterior, these are scalene posterior, scalenus medius, and scalenus anterior. And sometimes this scalenus anterior may not be considered as a floor muscle of the posterior triangle, because almost this entire muscle is overcrowded, means crossed by this sternocleidomastoid muscle. So we should not consider this anterior as a floor muscle. It is almost a boundary muscle for this triangle actually, right? So, but what are these muscles above downwards? Semispinalis, splenius capitis, levator scapulae, scalenus posterior, scalenus medius, and scalenus anterior. These are the muscles forming the floor of the posterior triangle. And all these muscles are covered by, see, along the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, see, means deep to the sternocleidomastoid, the investing layer is splitting and giving a facial covering for all these muscles. So these muscles are pre and paravertebral muscles. So these muscles are covered by that fascia. So we can consider that fascia as a prevertebral fascia. So what is the floor of the posterior triangle? Muscular carpet, the entirely covered by prevertebral fascia. So that is the floor of the posterior triangle, right? Now coming to the muscles. What are those muscles I told? Semispinalis capitis. You see, semispinalis, name itself indicates. Semi means half, spine means spinous process. So the upper half of the vertebral column, posteriorly. So what is this? Spinous process occupied by this muscle. Semispinalis muscle. It has 3 parts: thoracic muscle, cervicis part, and capitis part. So this semispinalis capitis is going, after taking origin, this transverse process and towards this spinous process, right? and is going upwards and is inserted to the nuchal line, superior nuchal line. So this is a muscle close to the apex of the posterior triangle. We can identify. You see here in this picture, this is the semispinal scapula. And just superficial to that, you see this is the splenius capitis muscle. So splenius takes origin from the upper 3 or 4 thoracic spines, then lower part of the ligamentum nuchae, then ascends upwards. You see this is the oblique muscle, then going towards the mastoid process and lateral third of the superior nuchal line. So this is a splenius muscle. The levator scapulae muscle. See the levator scapulae muscle, it takes origin from the transverse process, upper 3 or 4 cervical vertebrae. Then all these fibers unites to form a single pelli, which is inserted to the scapula medial border. So the insertion of levator scapulae extends from the superior angle of the scapula to the root of the spine of the scapula. So this is the area, medial border of the scapula for the insertion of levator scapulae. And rest of the medial border, as you know, receives the 2 more muscles. What are these muscles? Rhomboideus minor and rhomboideus major. Right? So as the name indicates, levator scapulae. So the by contraction of levator scapulae, it elevates the scapula. Okay, this is the action of the levator scapulae muscle. Then what are the Scalene group of muscles? See, Scalene group, as I told, it includes posterior, medius and anterior. So the scalenus anterior, what is the origin? Scalenus anterior takes origin from, here you can see this is anterior muscle, behind that this is scalenus medius and this is posterior. So these scalene muscles takes origin from the transverse process, means these are the costal elements of the cervical vertebra down to the first ribs, first 2 ribs only. First and second ribs receives the insertion. So what is the origin? See the scalenus anterior muscle. It takes origin from the anterior tubercles, mostly from the C3 level, but here is showing C2. So the anterior tubercles of the transverse process gives origin to the scalenus anterior muscle up to C6. So all these are fused to form single muscle pelli and is inserted into the inner border of the first rib. So you can appreciate and one can identify the medial border, the inner border of the first rib by means of a tubercle. So if you find out that tubercle, you can appreciate the side also, right? So exactly at the middle point of the inner border of first rib, there is a tubercle which is known as Scalene tubercle. From the tubercle extends onto the superior surface. There is an insertion of the scalenus anterior muscle. Then what is the scalenus medius muscle? It takes origin from the costo-transverse bar. Actually, you see, each transverse process of the cervical vertebrae presents 2 tubercles and 2 roots, anterior root, posterior root, and the anterior root terminates as a tubercle which is known as anterior tubercle. Posterior root terminates as a posterior tubercle. In between there is a bony bar, costo-transverse bar, right? So, and along these 2 roots there is a opening. So what is that? It is nothing but foramina transverse area. These are the features of the transverse process of the cervical vertebra. Out of all, what I told, anterior root, anterior tubercle, costo-transverse bar, posterior tubercle, posterior root. Out of all, except the posterior root, remaining structures are representing the costal elements. Why I am telling costal elements? Because these costal elements are further growing forwards in the form of ribs in the thoracic region. Whereas in other regions, what happened? These costal elements are reabsorbed. So there is no formation of the ribs. Only the ribs are formed in the thoracic region. As you know, what is the function of our ribs? They are protecting the vital organs present in the thorax. So here, these costal elements are reabsorbed in the cervical region, right? So in the place of this, only bony structures are appreciated, and among these 2 roots there is a foramen which is known as foramina transverse area for the entry of the vertebral artery, right? So The scalenus medius muscle takes origin from the costotransverse bars. Okay, upper 3 or 4 cervical vertebrae. Then it's inserted to the first rib behind the groove for the subclavian artery. So the upper surface of the first rib behind the scalenus anterior, there is an insertion for this scalenus medius muscle, right? Then scalenus posterior muscle, it takes origin from the posterior tubercles. From the posterior tubercles, it takes origin, then inserted to the second rib. Second rib, the outer surface of the second rib. So this is the origin from the costal elements and insertion to the ribs. So these muscles are important. Why? Why these muscles are developed here? These muscles are represented in the thorax by means of intercostal muscles. See, in between two ribs, we have three intercostal muscles. Intercostalis externus, internus, and intimus. So here, these three muscles are represented. The scalenus posterior, medius, and anterior. They are represented by these, what is that? Intercostalis externus, internus, and intimus. Okay. So they are the representative muscles of the intercostal muscles, right? So what is the location of these muscles? Paravertebral. So because of the reabsorption, there is no formation of these ribs. So in place of that, the muscles are developed prominently in this neck region. So very, very important muscles. So in between intercostal means, later I will discuss what is that. So these are the scalenus anterior, medius, and posterior muscles, right? So here you see important relation between the anterior and medius. We can appreciate the important nerves. What are these nerves? Brachial plexus along with an artery, that is the subclavian artery. In between these two muscles, important relation between these, among these muscles. Then coming to the division of posterior triangle. I told that posterior triangle further divided by means of a muscle. What is that? Omohyoid muscle. This is inferior belly of omohyoid, by which the posterior triangle is further divided. Above larger triangle is occipital triangle, and below a smaller triangle which is known as supraclavicular triangle. So supraclavicular triangle boundaries. You see, this is a triangle. So in front is bounded by posterior border of sternocleidomastoid. Behind is bounded, or above is bounded by the omohyoid, inferior belly of omohyoid. And below is bounded by the middle third of the clavicle. Whereas occipital triangle, in front by the sternocleidomastoid, posteriorly by the trapezius, and above this is apex, where these two muscles are meeting, and base by this inferior belly of omohyoid. So these are the two triangles of the posterior triangle. So what is this omohyoid muscle? See, omohyoid takes origin from the notch on the superior border of scapula. What is that notch? Suprascapular notch. So the suprascapular notch, and just adjacent to that, suprascapular notch is converted into a foramen by means of a ligament. What is that ligament? Suprascapular or transverse scapular ligament. So the scapular notch along with this ligament gives origin to this muscle. So what is this? Omohyoid muscle. So name indicates hyoid. So it should go to the hyoid bone, body of the hyoid. So in the course of this muscle, there is an intermediate tendon. So that's why it is divided into two bellies. So digastric two bellies. Similarly, here the omohyoid also presents two bellies, inferior belly and superior belly. There must be an intermediate tendon. So this is just under cover of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. You see, the omohyoid has this somewhat unique feature because that it does not run in a straight line. See, obliquely placed, right? Obliquely placed, and its attachment to its hyoid bone. And see, instead it turns about a pulley created by fibrous sling of tissue that attaches to the clavicle. So there is no a fibrous pulley. So, but to act on this intermediate tendon, a fascial sling is there. So what is that fascial sling? Omohyoid fascia. So omohyoid fascia is, some others are telling this is a derivative of the investing layer. Some others are, this is an upward extension from the clavipectoral fascia. But if you trace below upwards, clavipectoral fascia. From above downwards means omohyoid fascia, investing layer of the deep cervical fascia. So, okay. So, but what is the action? It acts as a pulley over this muscle. So, forms a fascial sling over the intermediate tendon and gets back to this clavicle. So, this is about the omohyoid muscle. And what is the action? By contraction from below, it depresses the hyoid bone. So now coming to the contents. What are the contents of this occipital triangle? So in this occipital triangle, contents. So what are the contents? Final part of accessory nerve. Actually, it is not a content because spinal accessory nerve is a nerve of these two boundary muscles. In evolution, the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius both are forming a single sheet of muscle. Okay, but later on, the muscle is split into two parts, anteriorly sternocleidomastoid, posteriorly trapezius. So, always you see the anatomy means it is indicated, the function always modifies the structure. So, here why the muscle is split? For the sake of movement. Where the mobility is required, the muscle may be split. Sometimes the stability is important. So in such case, the bellies are fused to form single muscle. See, for example, the best example for the most important stabilizer for the shoulder joint, inferiorly. What is that? Inferiorly, the shoulder joint is supported, means stabilized by means of coracobrachialis muscle. So coracobrachialis muscle is a single muscle derived from 2 or 3 bellies. They are fused to form single. So where the stability is important, so that fused. Here the mobility is important, that's why it is split. So how can you tell this is a splitting? If you do the dissection well, the spinal accessory nerve is present within the investing layer. So what is this investing layer? Already discussed in the deep cervical fascia. So on reaching the anterior border, the deep cervical fascia is splitted to enclose the sternocleidomastoid. Again, along the posterior border, it fused to form a single sheet, crosses the posterior triangle, right? And reaching the anterior border of the trapezius, again it is splitted and encloses the trapezius muscle. So within this splitting, we can identify this spinal accessory nerve. So we should see by a keen observation whether the spinal accessory nerve is within the facial roof. Means why I am telling facial roof? Between these two boundaries, a fascia is stretching. So that's why it can be called as a roof, right? So within the roof or outside the roof. It must be present within the roof. So this is an important structure. Don't consider as important content. It is an important structure present in the occipital triangle, right? So to supply these two important muscles of the posterior triangle. Then third and fourth cervical nerves. The third and fourth cervical nerves derived from directly from the cervical plexus. So supplying the trapezius. Whereas C2, C3 supply the sternocleidomastoid. Just you identify this picture, all of you. There is an obliquely placed spinal accessory nerve. So in the dissection, how can you appreciate, even in surgeries, how can you identify the spinal accessory nerve? This is the only nerve which is hooked around by means of a lesser occipital nerve. So how can you identify lesser occipital nerve? It ascends upwards along the posterior border of the sternocleidomastoid, right? So this is a spinal accessory nerve. Just below and parallel to this spinal accessory, the C3 and C4 nerves descends and disappears beneath the trapezius muscle. So beneath the trapezius, what happened? The spinal accessory and C3, C4, they are forming a plexus. Okay, so that plexus supply this particular muscle, trapezius. Then upper truncobrachial plexus. So what is this? Brachial plexus, we'll see detail. Then superficial cervical artery. then occipital artery close to the apex. These are the important contents of the occipital triangle. See, spinal axillary, as I told, this is a spinal part and this is cervical part passing through the vagus nerve, and the spinal part leaves the main trunk and appears in the posterior triangle where it supplies the trapezius, and before appearing posterior triangle it supplies the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And here you see it lies relatively superficial in the posterior triangle, leaving it vulnerable to the injury. So in case of surgeons, they want to drain the abscess in the subcutaneous space. So the subcutaneous abscess means they will give an incision. So if they will give a deep incision means immediately what is the structure is involved here? The superficial cutaneous branches as well as this accessory nerve, spinal accessory nerve. So we should take care before giving a deep incision. One must know what is the location of these nerves. So anatomy is important here, right? Now coming to the it is already covered in neuroanatomy, brachial plexus. So I want to just briefly, I want to explain what is the formation, parts of brachial plexus, branches, right? So what is the formation? The formation is by 5 roots. Upper 4 for the cervical plexus and lower 4 including T1, it forms a brachial plexus. So the brachial plexus are formed by the C5, C6, C7, C8 and T1. So all these 5 roots are involved in the formation of brachial plexus. Now what is the meaning of trunk? These roots are unites to form trunks. We have 3 trunks. Superior means upper trunk, middle trunk, lower trunk. So the C5 and C6 roots unites to form upper trunk. So this upper trunk is an important content of the occipital triangle. Then the C7 root itself continues as the middle trunk, whereas C8 and T1 unites to form the lower trunk. Okay, so the middle and lower trunks we can appreciate in the supraclavicular triangle. So in this way, the roots are unites to form the trunks. Now, each trunk just immediately beneath the clavicle divides into 2 divisions, anterior division, posterior division. Each trunk. So, anterior division of the upper and middle trunk unites to form lateral cord, whereas anterior division of the lower trunk continues as medial cord. Whereas posterior divisions of all the 3 trunks, upper, middle, lower, which forms the posterior cord. So these cords we cannot see in this posterior triangle as they descend behind the clavicle into the axilla. So what indicates here? These are the nerves, main great nerves supplying the upper limb formed in the posterior triangle. That's why in the dissection of the upper limb, we dissected first posterior triangle of the neck. So one can know the formation of the brachial plexus means by doing the dissection of posterior triangle only, right? So it has 3 segments, roots, trunks and divisions. So these divisions unites to form the cords. Then if you define the branches, these branches are divided into 2 sets, above the clavicle, below the clavicle. So above the clavicle means we can appreciate in the posterior triangle. Below or beyond the clavicle means we can appreciate in the axilla. So branches of the brachial plexus we can divide into supraclavicular and infraclavicular. So just I want to trace these branches here. You see, this is C5 roots, C6, C7, C8, T1. If you draw this diagram, means it is easy for representation of the brachial plexus, right? So all the 5 roots and each root unites with the adjacent root. So upper trunk, then this is the C7 root continues as the middle trunk, and this is the lower trunk. And each trunk is divided into anterior, posterior divisions. And see, anterior divisions of the upper and middle forming the lateral cord. And this is posterior cord, and this is medial cord. So the branches from the roots and branches from the trunks, they are considered as supraclavicular branches. So means we can appreciate these branches in the posterior triangle. Whereas infraclavicular branches means derived from the cords. There is no any branch from the division because the divisions are unites to form cords only, right? So these cords are appreciated. If you want to appreciate these cords, we should dissect the axilla. So what are these branches from the roots? An important nerve, dorsal scapular nerve. So the dorsal scapular nerve is derived from the C5 root, and a branch to the join with the phrenic nerve, because the phrenic nerve root value is C3, C4, C5. So C3, C4 means cervical plexus, whereas C5 means it is from this brachial plexus, means roots. Then long thoracic nerve. So here this is derived from the roots again, C5, C6, C7. Then muscular branches to the longus colli and scalenus muscle. See the cervical branches also, cervical plexus also supplying the skin and muscles of the neck. Here the brachial plexus also, roots are supplying the longus colli, means that is prevertebral muscle. Scalene muscles means paravertebral muscles. Then from the trunks, brachial plexus branches means only the upper trunk. The other two trunks never give any branch. So upper trunk gives off two important branches, suprascapular nerve to subclavius. So the suprascapular nerve is supplying the supraspinatus, infraspinatus. So how it enters the scapula? So here you identify the upper trunk gives off suprascapular nerve. So from here it extends further laterally, passes beyond the clavicle, then appears the scapular notch. So the nerve passes through the scapular notch and appears in the suprascapular fossa, where there is a muscle supraspinatus. Then through the spinoglenoid notch, we should know the scapula. So spinoglenoid notch, it appears in the infraspinous fossa, where it supplies the infraspinatus muscle. On its course, it supplies the joint, shoulder joint. Then another branch is nerve to subclavius. So nerve to subclavius is branch from the upper trunk. It passes beyond the clavicle and supplies the subclavius muscle. Here, the nerve to subclavius is important and very means surgically it is important. Why? Because sometimes this may give an additional branch where it joins with the phrenic nerve. And here we can call as a accessory phrenic nerve. So during the surgical removal of the phrenic nerve, we have to search for this accessory phrenic nerve, whether it is there or not. Okay, otherwise it may compress this subclavian artery, because after taking origin from this nerve to subclavius, it passes beyond the subclavian artery, then joins with the main phrenic nerve. So before doing the evolution of the phrenic nerve, surgeon must know whether there is accessory phrenic nerve is there or not. So how can you appreciate this now? It must be in front of the brachial plexus and brachial vessels, then passes beyond the vessels to join the phrenic nerve. So these are the two branches. Then from the what are the infraclavicular branches? Just I will discuss only what are these branches. Already it is over. It's not a part of posterior triangle, right? So what are these branches? From lateral cord, lateral pectoral nerve, muscular cutaneous nerve, lateral root of median nerve. Then from the medial cord, medial pectoral nerve, medial cutaneous nerve of arm, medial cutaneous nerve of forearm, ulnar nerve, and medial root of the median nerve. Here you can see medial root of median nerve and lateral root of median nerve. Then forms the median nerve. Then posterior cord, it gives upper subscapular branch, lower subscapular branch, in between thoracodorsal nerve, supplying the latissimus dorsi, right? Then it gives off an important branch to the important muscle, abduction of the shoulder. So what is that? Deltoid, supplied by the axillary nerve. Then finally, continuation of the posterior cord is a radial nerve. So these are the branches of the brachial plexus. Now, what is the clinical importance of this brachial plexus in the posterior triangle particularly? So in the first slide I told, very, very important, nerves are present. So what are these nerves? As you know, the cervical plexus and brachial plexus are formed by the upper 8 cervical roots, C1 to C8 and T1, right? So what is this palsy? So these are the palsy, muscle palsies. So Erb's palsy means, we should know Erb's point. So what is the Erb's point means? Exactly the junction, means between the C5 and C6. So what happened in the C5 and C6? The C5, C6 unites to form the upper trunk. So the point is known as Erb's points. If any injury is any trauma at this particular point, it leads to Erb's palsy. So what happened in the Erb's palsy? What is the cause of this Erb's palsy? See in this picture, during the normal delivery, there is no problem. But in forceps delivery, means in the forced delivery, what happened? They may stretch this neck region. So by this overstretching of the head, what happened? Angle must be increased, right? In between the head and shoulder. So due to increased angle, what happened? There is a stretching of the neck, particularly at this point of the C5 and C6, which is otherwise called Erb's point. So due to this, the muscles which are supplied by this Erb's point nerves. So what are these nerves are present in the Erb's point? So here altogether 6 nerves. So how can I tell 6 nerves? Identify here C5, C6 roots, and both are unites to form the single trunk, that is upper trunk. Then upper trunk divides, gives off 2 important branches, suprascapular nerve and subclavius, nerve to subclavius. Then trunk is divided into anterior and posterior division. So by which what happened, if any damage at this particular point, it leads to paralysis of important muscles which are supplying the arm. So what are those muscles? Deltoid. Just imagine if a deltoid is damaged, nerve to deltoid is damaged, means there is no abduction. So what is the position of the arm? Abduction, opposite is adduction. So the arm just hangs by the side of the trunk. That is the adduction, so close to the trunk. Then after that, the infraspinatus and supraspinatus also involved. So what happened? There is no lateral rotation. So no lateral rotation means the arm is medially rotated. Then biceps brachialis are involved. So by means what happened? There is no flexion at the elbow joint. So no flexion means what is the other opposite position? Extension. Okay. Then brachioradialis is involved. So instead of supination, there is a pronation. So together what happens? It gives a position, the portus tip hand. What is the position? Portus tip. How can they will ask a tip from behind? By placing the arm by the side of the trunk, then pronation and extension at the elbow joint. So exactly the Erb's paralysis resembles the position of the portus tip hand. Then so we can call this Erb's palsy as a upper brachial plexus injury because it appears at the level of the C5 and C6. Whereas other palsy is a Klumpke's palsy. So in case of Klumpke's palsy, what happened? It is also maybe acquired or means during accidents. What happened? Or you see in this picture, is just overhanging, right? So in such case, what happened? The arm is overstretched. So by this overstretching of the arm, and the second picture you see here, in during delivery, difficult delivery, the hand is stretching, maximum is stretching. So due to this overstretching of the arm at the axilla, so it leads to damage to the particular points where the lower trunk is formed. So what is the lower trunk? C8 and T1. Lower trunk means C8 and T1. So this particular C8 and T1 is forming the medial cord, as you know. So the medial cord means important branches are medial cutaneous nerve of arm, forearm, ulnar nerve, then medial pectoral nerve, then medial root of median nerve. So by which what happened? The main flexors of the wrist and main flexors of the disease, they are involved. And there is no cutaneous sensation along the forearm. But how the medial aspect of the arm is subsided? Because the medial aspect of the arm is supplied by another important nerve. What is that nerve? Interposterior brachial nerve, right? So there is no loss of the sensation along the medial aspect of the arm, but there is a loss of cutaneous sensation along the medial aspect of the forearm, hand, and includes little finger. Whereas the wasting of the muscles of the hand. So that what happened? the hand is completely means over flexion. That is the position of the Klumpke's paralysis. The position represents the anatomically we can call this is a claw hand. So these are the two paralyses are important. Why? Because the injury lies at the posterior triangle. So we must know what are these nerves are present in this posterior triangle. Then coming to the contents of supraclavicular triangle. Okay. See, supraclavicular triangle means third part of subclavian artery, subclavian vein, terminal part of the external jugular vein, trunks of brachial plexus already discussed, and suprascapular, dorsoscapular arteries, and supraclavicular lymph nodes. Here you see, just above the clavicle, we can appreciate the supraclavicular lymph nodes. And these supraclavicular lymph nodes are very much important in case of left side. You see here, left side, because it suggests the abdominal malignancy. If any enlargement of the lymph nodes means postero-inferior group of the cervical lymph node, deep cervical lymph nodes present in the supraclavicular triangle, that indicates the abdominal malignancy. So most probably from the stomach. So maybe from the gallbladder, pancreas, kidney, even testis, ovaries. So we can suspect this carcinoma from this particular abdominal viscera, right? So on the left side, these lymph nodes are otherwise called Virchow's nodes, otherwise called Virchow's glands. Okay. See here, what are the branches, important structures? As I told, the third part of subclavian artery. Now you see. See in the supraclavicular triangle, this is the subclavian artery. So the subclavian artery is divided by means of this muscle, scalenus anterior, into three parts. Medial to that is the first part, behind that is the second part, lateral to that is the third part. And these three parts are giving important branches. The first part is vertebral artery, internal thoracic artery, thyrocervical trunk, costocervical trunk on left side. Whereas this costocervical trunk on right side is branched from second part. Then third part gives of dorsoscapular arteries. So the dorsoscapular artery accompanies the dorsoscapular nerve, where supplies the levator scapulae and rhomboideus muscles. So these are all branches already discussed in the previous classes. So see, this is a course vertebral artery, and this is the internal thoracic artery, right, supplying the anterior thoracic wall, and afterwards supplies the rectus sheath also. Then subclavian vein, it's not a content, but it is present beyond the clavicle. So what is the subclavian vein? It is just a continuity of the axillary vein beyond the clavicle. Then extends up to this supraclavicular triangle. So up to the medial border of the scalenus anterior. So tributaries, as you know, all these tributaries, external jugular vein and internal jugular vein, these are very important tributaries. And what is the termination of this subclavian vein? It terminates by joining the internal jugular vein into brachiocephalic vein. Okay, to sum up, so what is this posterior triangle? It is a part of the side of the neck behind the sternocleidomastoid. And why we have to know this posterior triangle? Because of these structures, important structures. So cervical plexus and brachial plexus. In addition, an important nerve, spinal accessory nerve. Then here, the third part of the axillary artery is in content of this supraclavicular triangle. Okay, so just you read what is this axillary sheath. Okay, actually I want to ask question. So what is this? Why the axillary sheath is containing subclavian artery, not subclavian vein? Okay, in the next class I will ask you. Thank you.